tuning in from around the world. My name is Stephen Magwenzi, and welcome to the Dive into Proverbs. Today you've joined us day number 17 of 31. It's been such an interesting ride. We're over the hump. I think it was yesterday where we were over the middle part, because there's 31 chapters in Proverbs. We are at chapter 16, which means we've got over the halfway point, and now we're climbing. We're on our way right to the end. Over the next probably 14 days left, it's going to be really interesting. There's a lot that we can pull out of Proverbs that are going to give you great insight for living. All right. What I like about chapter number 17 is that chapter 17, has got so many different aspects that it's talking about. But I want to pick up, some of I think the key, a key verse. That's in verse number 14. And really the Proverbs 17 is telling us about the importance of controlling one's words. It's very important that you control your words, because if you don't, it can land you into a whole lot of trouble, especially in your relationships. Be they at work, at home, especially at home, and of course in your business and in whatever other endeavor that you have going on. So chapter 17 verse 14 says, starting a quarrel is like opening a floodgate. So stop before a dispute breaks out. And I like the translation, the Passion Translation says, don't be one who is quick to quarrel, for an argument is hard to stop, and you will never know how it will end, so don't even start. You don't know how it's going to end, so don't even start. And I like the image that they use of breaching a dam, letting the flood roar out. Earthen dams or levees are prone to failure when allowed to leak. The problem here, you see, is that once you release that water, where it goes is unexpected and uncontrolled, and the consequences are just going to be really, really, really crazy for you. So, oh my goodness. So anyway, let me just speak to this. All of us are always going to fall into disagreements. It doesn't matter who you are going to disagree with somebody. And the issue here is not that you don't disagree, but it's what you do when you recognize that this disagreement is going to lead, or I don't know where it's actually going to lead. It can go so many different ways. And the key thing that you want to know, when you picture a flood, when a flood comes, it sweeps everything in its path, and where it goes, you really don't know. And this is why we need to be mindful. I like verse number 27, just to contrast verse 14. It says, a truly wise person uses few words. A person with understanding is even-tempered. And this is the posture that we want to have, an even-tempered posture. But why is it a problem when we don't stop arguments just as they start? Where will it take us? I know for myself that when I've had disagreements, with my significant relationship, I bring the heavy artillery. I bring everything. I'm there because one, I guess you want to win the argument. And the problem with having that kind of mindset, you see, is that you might win the battle, but you will lose the war. Nobody tends to win when you start arguing. The reason why it's dangerous to not stop it is because you start to bring up so many things, and you start to confuse the real issue that you're fighting over. And that will create absolute havoc. So the early moments of a disagreement are the ideal time to make peace. So just before it starts to sort of like crank up a bit, that's really the best time to stop. And I like what Jesus said in Matthew 5 verse 25. He says, come to terms quickly with your accuser while you're going with him to the court, lest your accuser hand you over to the judge, and the judge to the guard, and you be put in prison. So there is really a consequence when we don't stop actions very quickly. And where it goes is completely beyond our control. And the message there from Christ, which is similar to what Proverbs is saying, is that you better stop things before they get out of your control. And so what we know, when you're fighting, is that sometimes what can happen is that you start stacking issues, you start bringing the frustrations from other conversations, you start bringing things that are not possibly related to this thing, then you start to say things that you will really begin to regret. Because what happens, you see, is that when we're angry, when we're not even tempered, we are prone to say whatever comes to mind, because our instinct is to defend ourselves. And of course, in defending ourselves, we don't care what we do, because all we're trying to do is to get that person off us, and so we can say anything to do that. Now, we say things that we end up regretting, but the whole purpose of sometimes arguing is because we just want them to just get away from me, and the best way to do that is to use your words to cause injury to the other person. So it takes two people to fight. You can avoid, just looking at my notes, you can avoid or end a fight by letting a conflict go. Is it really worth it? You got to ask yourself. And oftentimes, I'm not suggesting that you don't have proper discussions or you don't fight. I think that if you're in a relationship, you have to fight fair. And you have to, even though it sounds like a bit of theory, I actually think that there should be some things that you do not bring up. So for example, if you're having an argument, you have to sort of like say, whatever happens, we will never threaten each other with things like divorce or I'm walking out, or you never threaten that kind of stuff. So you don't bring that artillery to the fight. There's certain things that you definitely should say, these are the non-negotiables. No matter how we're feeling towards each other, we will not say this. Because otherwise, if you don't, then everything is open game. And because you're trying to get that other person off you, you will say, well, if you continue that way, well, I'm going to leave you. And what that does, that it doesn't actually resolve things. Now it creates a whole new set of issues. So if possible, walk away if you can. Is it possible to do that? Especially when it's over a dispute about something that is important to both of you. I think you can. If we take the example of Abraham, Lot and Abraham were having some conflict around the grazing fields for their animals. And so instead of arguing with Lot who was going to take which portion of the land, XYZ, Abraham let Lot have his first pick. Now that would have saved a hell of a lot of arguments. And even though Abraham knew that he possibly had more rights to perhaps the land than Lot did, he still allowed him to choose. And you can see, we all know the stories where God then promised to look after Abraham and to bless him even more compared to what Lot had. So even though it may seem difficult, sometimes we have to ask ourselves, is this really worth it? Is it really worth it? Because you see, quarrels and disputes, strife and contention are difficult to control, and they can cause great damage. And so what we have to do is just to learn to back off, still have the discussion. I'm not talking about, for example, ignoring the conflict, because what happens, you see, is that when you let an argument fester, you are just creating problems. And the key thing is that best thing is let's be even-tempered so that we don't cause damage to our significant relationships, be that your spouse, be that your children, be that your boss at work. We have to possibly, the best thing sometimes to do is just to say, excuse yourself from that situation and then revisit it when you've let the water subside and you're no longer boiling. Because at times when we respond, our response is tinged by a sting, and it's there to cause injury because we feel offended, and so sometimes pride can get the better of us. And so, key thing, the importance of controlling one's words. We do know the scriptures do talk about the power of life and death is in the tongue. So if we can control this one, we can go a long way in making sure that we have good relationships with those people that we love. And so thank you very much for joining me today on day number 17. Thank you for liking, subscribing, and of course click the notification bell so you will know when the next chapter is released. Can't wait to see you all tomorrow. God bless you and have a wonderful rest of the day.